Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Sinatra.
Tommy, come out and take another bow. Tom Dreesen, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. That's my man. My number one man. Tommy's funny, isn't he? He's a marvelous guy, Tommy is. Where is he? Take a bow, pal. There, this is a funny man. And a nice man.
Hi, I'm Darren Carter. I'm at the lobby at the Laugh Factory. I'm working with Tom. This is his Instagram. I want to show him how to do some stuff. See how I'm holding that right there? That means it's filming. It's filming. And you have exactly 60 seconds, but we'll just do a little bit. And I tell him he should post more. Encourage him. I'd say post as much as you can. It doesn't have to be funny, and it doesn't have to be good. We just want to hear from Tom. We love hearing from Tom.
Well, if it doesn't have to be funny, then I'm in.
Pocket Party.
Carter Dreesen, scene 1, and we're rolling.
Action! and we're back. Hey everybody, it's your host Darren Carter of the Pocket Party podcast with my one and only Tom Dreesen.
Your one and only.
I know that didn't say.
Am I allowed to be shared?
Exactly. The one and only. I was going to say my favorite guest, and then I didn't want to leave out the other guests and make them feel but. Can I just say thank you for doing the podcast? You've been a guest on here, I don't know, maybe 4 times, I think.
I remember the first time, weren't we upstairs with a couple other guys at the Universal?
Oh, that's right. That was, years ago. That was another podcast that I did with the partner. He got a job in radio, moved away, and then I started my own now. So this is great to have you on. And man, I appreciate it, Tom. Thank you.
It was Sunday night, and I the White House called, but I said, no, I got something else to do.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. That's great, Tom. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being at your own home. So that was weird. Yeah.
This is my bat cave. I've owned homes in my life in Newport Beach and in Sherman Oaks and, of course, Illinois. But after I got a divorce, I wanted a condo. I didn't want to be a homeowner anymore because I'm not. You probably are, but I'm not a kind of guy I can't put a doorknob on. I can't fix anything. So having a condominium, this is great because they have a homeowners association. I'm on the road all the time. I lock up and I go. And my daughters check on it once in a while to make sure it's okay. But this is what I wanted. I wanted a condo and no homeowners responsibilities.
Right. That's great. One of the things I like about you, and we'll get into a lot of the great stories you have, with the people that got you into show business. But I love your attitude of gratitude, and also how you look at things mentally. You were telling me a story one time about your mind is like a garden.
When I give motivation talks, as you know, on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those 4 points. And visualization, when I talk about the power of the subconscious mind, it's a book that changed my life called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And I like to explain things to, like I'll say to students when I'm talking to them, or comedians, whoever I'm talking to, corporations. I take a glass of water and I'll pour dirt in it. And I'll ask them, someone please drink this. And of course no one will. I say, you won't drink dirt, why would you think dirt? If you won't ingest filth in this part of your body, why would you ingest filth in this part of your body? Negative thoughts are dirt.
Right.
And I talk about that the mind is like a garden.
Yeah.
Your mind is like a garden. So positive thoughts are flowers. So if you planted flowers and positive thoughts in your mind, and weeds grew, negative thoughts, would you allow the weeds to grow in your garden? No, you'd dig the weeds out and you'd replant flowers.
Right.
And positive thoughts are flowers. We if you can control your thoughts, you can control your feelings. What a gigantic concept. Sometimes when I'm giving a motivation talk, I'll say to them, before this is over with, I'm going to give you the secret. Because everybody's looking for the secret.
Yeah.
What's the secret?
Yeah.
What's the secret to inner peace? What's the secret to success? What's the secret? And by the time I end my motivation talk, I'll say, and here's what I wanted to tell you, the secret. The secret is you. You're the secret. This is the vehicle you were given. This is your universe right here. And you can plant flowers in your garden or you can plant weeds. But you have that control. And that's You know, no, you got me on a soapbox, so I have to back off a little bit.
No, I like it.
Yeah, but that's what you're talking about. What I think the mind is a garden, and positive thoughts are flowers. And if weeds grow, we dig them up and we replant flowers. You know, well, negative thoughts into your mind, of course they will. They're swirling through the universe all the time. We don't have to let them grow. You know, I sometimes be thinking negative, and I go, oh, what am I doing? Cancel, like your computer, delete. And dig the weeds out, and now I'll replant that with flowers and positive thoughts, you know. Again, you know, you are far more powerful than you even can imagine you are.
I remember one time I said, how you feeling or something? And you go, well, I'm feeling good. And if I'm not feeling good, I make myself feel good. I tell myself, and you're right, it's the power of, it's all in how you look at something, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's you know, self-talk. There's a book by Shad Helmstetter called Self-Talk. The most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself.
Yeah.
That's the most important person you're ever going to talk to is yourself. You know, and so say good things to yourself. Encourage yourself, you know. There's so many ways I could go here, but I remember being on a show many years ago, an ABC show in Las Vegas, and I was performing there. I was performing at that time with Sammy Davis Jr. at Caesar's Palace, and they had this ABC show there, and because I love motivation, they put me on the show with these two women. They wrote a book called Healing the Child Within. And it was fascinating. But inside of us is a child. There's a little Darren.
Yeah.
And little Darren, he's 5, 6 years old. He's always going to be in here. And he's going to school, and he wants everybody to love him. He wants everybody to come. He's a nice little boy, a nice little soul. And he just wants everybody to love him, you know. But then adult Darren grows up. Yeah. But that little Darren never leaves us. Whenever you get anxiety, what do you get? In the stomach, right?
Yeah.
If you're worried about the set, you're worried about your really good set. I used to say when I first started out, okay, little Tommy, adult Tommy's got to go out and do this job.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get back to you later.
Yeah.
But
when
I got confident out there, I let little Tommy out sometimes because he wanted to play too. I'd say something childlike on stage, you know. So anyhow. It's a lot of talk. But.
That's great. No, I like that. That's a good way to talk to ourselves. I have a question. Let's talk about Sammy Davis Jr. When you first met Sammy Davis Jr., what was that like?
I did my first Tonight Show. First of all, digress. I had a wife and 3 kids the day I went in show business, you know, and as you know, I was with a comedy team for years. The team broke up. We'll talk about that later if you want. But when the team broke up, I ended up at the Comedy Store, you know, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, left my wife and kids in Illinois, going through a tough time.
Yeah.
And then the audition for Mitzi at the Comedy Store was almost greater pressure than the Tonight Show because in those days it was the only game in town. There was no Laugh Factory. There was no improvisation. There was just the Comedy Store. So if Mitzi didn't like you, it's back to Harvey, Illinois, pal.
Wow.
You know, so the pressure was enormous. I finally get on there, and then I start developing material, but then start courting the Tonight Show coordinators. Craig Tennis was his name, and also Paul Block. And I wanted them to come and see me, you know, and so I could get on the Tonight Show, you know. And it took a long time, and I finally got on the Tonight Show. I got bumped 3 times in a row, and they finally put me on, and that night I scored. The moment I scored, a whole new world opened up for me.
Wow.
I started doing Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train. I was the only white comedian to ever do Soul Train. American Bandstand, $20,000 Pyramid, a match game, and a show called Sammy and Company. Sammy Davis Jr. had a talk show, a TV show out of Lake Tahoe, out of Harrison, Lake Tahoe. And I was always a fan. And I finally got on that show, and I did a whole routine about growing up in a black neighborhood, as I did, and playing basketball on an all-black basketball team, as I did. And the neighbor talked about neighbor stuff, and Sammy loved it, and he said, "I'm going to take you on the road with me," and he did for 3 years, you know. And to sit in the wings and to watch Sammy Davis Jr. night after night was like show business 101.
Right.
This was a master of the stage, a master. That Frank Sinatra said he never heard Sammy hit a clinker. Sammy could sing as good as anybody out there. He could dance better than anybody out there. He could do comedy as good as any comedian I ever met. He could do impressions better than any impression I ever met out there. And there was a lot of great impressions. Wow. He could play the piano. He could play the drums. He could play the trumpet. So sitting in the wings, every night after my show, I sat in the wings and I watched this master. And the very first time I went to Las Vegas was with him. We're at Caesar's Palace, and opening day we had rehearsal, And then went to our dressing rooms because the show was going to start in a couple hours. I wandered out on stage. I wanted to get familiar with that stage. Caesar's Palace is a real difficult room to work because it has a high ceiling. You know, I was under contract to like 8 different hotels in Vegas. I always liked the Sands, the Riviera, the Desert Inn, the Golden Nugget downtown. They had low ceilings. Laughter is sound. It hits a ceiling and comes at you. High ceilings like Caesar's were always difficult rooms to work. And they served dinner during the comedian show. That was always a tough show. So, but I'm walking out on the stage that afternoon, and Sammy Davis saw me. He came out of his dressing room. I was all alone. No one was in the audience. I was just getting the feel of the stage. He said, "You a little nervous, babe?" I said, "Well, you know, it's my first time in Las Vegas, and I'm opening for you."
Yeah.
He said, "See these boards on the stage?" He said, "You earned every one of these boards. This is your stage. They can't take that from you. If they could do what you do, they'd be up here. They can't do what you do. That's why they're out there. This is your stage. Don't let them take that from you. You own the stage. You earn the right to be here." That was his pep talk to me opening night.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how much? Do you remember how much time you had to do it all? Or
Here's what Sammy said at rehearsal. And the very
Mm-hmm.
first time, Nat Brandywine was the entertainment director there, and Nat Brandywine said to me, "Tommy, you'll do 20 minutes, and Sammy will do an hour and 10. We do 90-minute shows here in Las Vegas. We want him out of the room and into the casino." And Sammy said, "No, Nat, this is Tommy's first time here. They serve dinner here. Comedians die a death here." He said, "I'll come out and I'll do maybe 4 songs, and then I'll bring Tommy out."
Wow.
He said, "I'll bring Tommy out," and then he said, "Tommy, this is your first time here. You got to score. If you score, the critics are all in the audience in those days. You know, and the reviews, the Variety, the Hollywood Reporter, the Las Vegas reviews, and New York reviews and stuff. So." Even though we're in Las Vegas, the New York Times, people like that covered Chicago Tribune. Sammy said, "You got to score, Tommy. If you do score, they'll bring you back here."
Yeah.
So so Sammy said, "Tommy, I'll do 3 of our songs, and then you do whatever you do 25, 30, 20, whatever you think you got them, and then I'll finish up the rest of the time." So opening night, I mean, every night, Sammy Davis, they'd say, you know, now waiters and waitresses are serving food.
Yeah.
When Sammy Davis walked out, their job is to have that room food cleared before the headliner comes out. Sammy comes out, he starts singing. They were taking food away from people who hadn't started eating it, you know, because they had to get it for the headliner. He'd do like 3 or 4 songs, and this is how he'd introduce me every night. He'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen," you know, after 3 or 4 songs, he'd say, "You've been good to me through the years, my audience." He said, you during my good times and bad times, but you never left me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. He said, "So you've been like family to me. When you have family like that and they do things for you, you want to do something for them, like maybe bring them a gift.
Yeah.
I got a gift for you.
Oh.
I saw this comedian on my show, and he's been traveling with me, and you're going to love him. You're welcome to his first time in Las Vegas, you know, Tom Dreesen." And I'd walk out after he sang 4 songs. He had the audience up here.
Wow.
I'd open with every night, I'd say, "All my life I dreamed that one day I might work Las Vegas, and I dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act."
Yeah.
And he loved it. He loved it. He laughed, and, you know, he'd be nervous, and he laughed. And, you know, and he was my reviews were fantastic, and I never stopped working Vegas, and I, you know, for years with different artists, you know, and
wow.
You know, Sammy was he just was a joy to watch.
Hey, man, just watching, like you said, veterans, people who are really good at their craft. You pick up the little things, you know, and you know, I was watching this. He recently passed away, Tom T. Hall, a country music artist.
Oh, wonderful.
He was fantastic.
I love little baby ducks.
Yeah.
Trucks and rain.
Yeah, and he's great. He was great. And I read his book, and
I did too. I read his book.
Oh, you read his book?
I read his book, and I wrote him a letter. But I never heard from him, but I wrote a letter to the publisher telling him how much I enjoyed it. You know?
That was a great book. You know, it was fantastic. And one of I saw him in concert online. I was watching it online, and one of the things he said at the end, he said something like, "Oh, before I go," he goes, "I know it's not possible, but I hope you had as much of a good time tonight as I did. Mm-hmm. Good night." Something very sweet like that. And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know,
the appreciation, you know, and
you know, if you're going to become, I tell you, I just told a young comedian last night, a young girl that was just starting out. And a young guy was with her at the same time, and they wanted pictures. I was doing at a comedy I told you about earlier, the Comedy Chateau. And I told her, I said, if you're going to become a brain surgeon, you would go watch brain surgeons operate. You wouldn't just go right into surgery. You'd watch brain surgeons operate. If you're going to become a comedian, go watch the masters. Go watch people who are doing what you want to do on stages that you want to be on one day. Now, I don't mean to copy their material or anything like that, but I said, watch how they go from one subject to another. Sooner or later, you'll see a comedian and say, "Oh, I like that comedian. I can identify with that." And I said, so study the masters, and by the way, that I studied Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, all these people I work with, Smokey Robinson. I watched them work too, and how did they take command of that stage? Yeah. So that's what we do. We watch those who came before us.
Right. I was watching Frank Sinatra live in concert, 1978, and he reminded me of the patter of a comic. He was doing the songs. He seemed so relaxed, and he's interacting, and he made that room seem like there was just talking to, a few people. He was so good at it.
That's whenever a person is, it's an artist to me. When they make their work look one word, effortless. Jack Benny made comedy look easy. Yeah. And it's not, and it's not.
Right.
But he made it look easy. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy. You will be my music. You will be my song. You say, I can do that. No, you can't. No, you can't. Yeah. He just made it look like you could.
Yeah.
When you walk out on stage every night, it's like this. As you know, Darren, it's like this. Your wife says, "We got 40 people in the living room, and I've got dinner ready. I don't have dinner ready. I want you to go out there and talk to them for the next 20 minutes. Tell them about your childhood. Tell them about when you were going to school. Tell them those funny stories you tell all the time." And you walk out and you say, "Dinner's going to be ready in a few minutes, folks." But I got to tell you something. I was at Gelson's this morning, and it's a conversation, not a presentation.
Yes.
Every night you walk out on stage, it's a conversation, not a presentation. Is it your act? You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not an act. Right. And you make it look like it's effort. It's a conversation. These are jokes. We know they're jokes, but they don't know that. Yeah. So each night, you go out there, it's a conversation, not a presentation.
Right, and you're really good at that. I was watching one of your TV appearances, a recent TV appearance, and it was on Huckabee, and man, you were so... You talked about your high school reunion, how you ran into your math teacher, and when you said those lines, I'm like, I actually had to rewind it again. I'm like, how did you do that? It was like X. I don't remember the joke, but it was about
x to the 5th power times x to the 5th power is x to the 10th power. That's in algebra. You don't multiply exponents; you add them. Yeah. And he said, "That's amazing." I said, I said, first of all, I remembered his name. He said, "That's amazing." Then when I did that, he said, "That's incredible." I said, "You know what else is incredible? That's the first time I've ever been able to use that since you taught it to me."
Yeah, it was great the way you just, like you said, you just rattled it off, blah blah blah, and then you got to the next story. And then you had a little surprise punchline, and I watched one of your Letterman appearances. The same thing. You're just able to. It looks like a conversation, then boom, you hit him with that funny punchline. And
every story has a beginning, a middle, and ending. Also, that's what we do. If the story doesn't have a poignant ending, it better have a funny ending, right? And I've sat with other comedians in an audience watching a new comedian or a comedian we know.
Right.
But they'll start going to a story, and we're like this. Yeah. And the story keeps going on and on and on, and pretty soon we're leaning back, and pretty soon now we're like this, and the story's going on, and we're all looking at one another with the same thought.
Yeah.
This better have a hell of an ending.
Right.
You just took us on a long journey. It's okay, but it better have a hell of an ending if you're going to go a long time.
Right. So I recently saw you at the Comedy Store. They had the 50th anniversary, and the lesson that I've learned, it's so funny. It took me so long to learn this, I guess, but is to, how they say sometimes just listen and not speak, just kind of listen. And when a guy like you is talking, I want to go over there and just listen. I just want to listen. I don't want to tell you like how much I know about something or whatever. It's like, and right when I walked in, you were in the middle of a story. I don't know if you remember. It was about Sammy Davis Jr. and there was a misunderstanding, and some guy ordered something. And do you remember that story? Do you want to tell us that one?
Are you talking about the story? I don't remember exactly, but are you talking about the story where he was at the Black Expo in Chicago, where he came out to sing? Is that the story?
I think so. Was it something about? I think Sammy thought the guy was calling him a name or something.
Oh no! That was. It's in my book. It's in my book.
Oh, you guys check out this book. It's fantastic. Still Standing.
Yeah, and the subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. But it's the story of my life, and it's from my childhood to how I grew up on the south side of Chicago, poor with 8 brothers and sisters, shining shoes in bars, setting pins in bowling alleys, caddying in the summertime, selling newspapers on a corner, all to help feed my brothers and sisters. And there's so many stories in here that are full circle. You know, when I was selling newspapers on that corner, years later they named that street after me. You know,
Wow.
But I mean, a lot of these stories are full circle. Where I was shining shoes in bars as a little boy to help feed my brothers and sisters, and Frank Sinatra was on the jukebox. And years later, I'm flying with Frank. You know, all over the world.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of full circle stories in there. But to tell you about this particular night it's really an interesting. I had been touring with Sammy just a little bit. And we were going back into Caesar's Palace. And he hadn't talked to Frank Sinatra in 4 years. They had a falling out. And it was because Sammy was doing cocaine at that time, and Frank was very much against that. And Sammy later quit that. But at that time, they hadn't talked for 4 years. So Sammy calls me and says, "Hey, Tom, we're going back into Caesar's Palace." And normally we would go in the day of, and then you rehearse in the afternoon, and you do your show that night. He said, "I want to go in a day early." He said, "Frank is closing at Caesars and we open the next day." And Barbara Sinatra and my wife, Alta Vies, have got Frank and I together. After Frank's first show, we're going to go have dinner with him. And he said, and then we're going to all see the second show. I want my peeps. He called his entourage his peeps. And I was part of that because I was his opening act. He said, and at that time I had not known Frank. He said, I want my peeps. I want you to come and see the second show with me. I said, okay, so sure, I'll see Frank Sinatra, and I get in there and go to my room, check in, and come back, and now I go down to the showroom, and Sammy's not there yet. I'm sitting with some of Sammy's entourage, his secretary Shirley Rhodes and his conductor George Rhodes and people like that. Dino Meminger was his road manager, and anyhow, we're sitting there, and here comes Sammy. He's so excited. Frank and I are talking again, babe. Frank and I are talking again. The girls got us together, and he had several glasses of wine, and now he ordered another drink. And he was so excited because he adored Frank, and Frank really adored him and admired him a great deal. So now, Sammy's sitting there, and he's pounding him down. Now, Frank's got one more song to go, and then he's going to do New York, New York, and he's done. And Frank bolts. He always used to leave the stage like the building was on fire, So Frank starts with, "She gets too hungry for dinner at 8," and Sammy jumps up on this table and runs across the stage. They had it prepared. He was going to do Lady as a Tramp with Frank. Yeah. Sammy runs across the long table onto the stage, and Frank just keeps singing, "She ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da. With the people she hates. That's why the Lady is a Tramp." Sammy gets a microphone, and they do it together. Now they do the song together. The audience is cheering and screaming and going on. Sammy comes back and sits with us. Frank does his closing number and leaves. Now the place is mobbed, and the bodyguard, a guy named Dwayne, former LA cop, I remember, he said, "Mr. Davis, we better not go through this crowd. You'll never get out of here. Let's go through the kitchen, the side way." Now Sammy's now into his cups, had a lot to drink. Yeah, he had a hat on, cocked ace deuce. We're going through the kitchen. I'm not drinking. The entourage is behind me. I'm ahead walking through the kitchen, and a black guy with his back to us, a waiter, says to a white guy, a waiter up ahead, they served food in those days at Caesar, so they had these big racks with meat in, trays of meat, steaks. So he hollers, and he doesn't see who's coming out. He goes, "Hey, Al, bring up the meat. Bring up the meat." And Sammy jumps out, and he said to the guy, "Who the hell you calling buckwheat? Who you calling buckwheat?" And the guy turns around, it's Sammy Davis Jr. He said, I didn't call. Now, meanwhile, DeAndre, what's going on? What did he say? He said, he called Sammy buckwheat. He called Sammy buckwheat. And a couple of these guys had guns. And the guys, the waiters, I didn't say that. He said, and Sammy's looking at him. I said, "Hold it. Sammy, he didn't call you that. He didn't call you that." Sammy looked at me, and they all walked away. I went, "Ooh, boy." I was supposed to go up to the suite to a party. Yeah. So I go to my room. I'm not going to come there. Shirley Rhodes calls me in the room. She said, "Sammy wants you to come to the suite for having a party." I said, "I think I'll come tomorrow," because I wasn't drinking and they were all drinking. And I've been around drinking people my whole life. I used to be one of them myself. So I know how that can get. So I said, "I'll come tomorrow." She said, "No, Tommy, it's cool. Come on down." So I go to the penthouse suite he had, and there's a lot of people in there, stars and stuff. And I go to the bar, and I'm sitting with Murphy Bennett, who had been with him for years, was like his road manager of LA. So anyhow, I'm sitting there talking to Murphy, and Sammy's working his way around him, and he's drunk. And he comes, he sits at the table, and he said, now here, let me digress. Whenever I was alone with Sammy, only when I was alone with him, because he knew I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, he would start talking to me like I'm another black guy.
Yeah.
We just, like street talk, brothers talk. He said, so Sammy said, now let me see if I get this straight. I'm the brother who pays you, and you stick up for the brother in the kitchen who you don't even know. He said, explain that to me, Sammy was as articulate as anybody, but now we're street talking.
Right.
So I said, Sammy, and I couldn't say the word buckwheat. I'm talking to Sammy Davis Jr., one of the greatest entertainers, not the greatest on the planet. And I said, Sammy, the guy didn't call you. And I started laughing. I said, can't wait. The guy didn't call you? I couldn't. I said, the guy didn't call you? And he's not laughing. He's staring at me with this hard look in his eyes. And so, finally I said, the guy didn't call you buckwheat, Sammy. So I leave. The next day in my dressing room getting ready for the show, Sammy comes in, he's stone sober. He sits down, he said, okay, babe, run it by me. Well, tell me about last night. So I told him the story. I said, the guy was hollering, bring up the meat. I don't know where you got that buckwheat from. He said, whoa, I had a lot to drink last night. He said, do you know who the guy is? If we go in there, could you point him out? At Caesars in those days, you'd leave stage left, and right there was a door going into the kitchen. So Sammy and I go right to the kitchen, and I found the black guy. I said, Mr. Davis wants to talk to you. And the waiter turned around, he said, Mr. Davis, he said, that you would think I would call you that, or any brother that. And Sammy said, tell me, he says, I owe you an apology. He said, I had a lot to drink last night, and I was out of line. And he said, and the waiter was saying, my mother lives in Cleveland. She told me when I told her you were coming here, she said, you must catch his show. He's the greatest entertainer. And so anyhow, Sammy said, I really apologize. Now the next day, Sammy's secretary came to me and hands me a box and said, Sammy wants you to bring this to the waiter. So I go in the kitchen, I hand to him this little box, and he opens it up. It's a Rolex watch.
Wow.
He bought him a Rolex watch.
Wow.
So I go to the dressing room, me and Sammy are alone. I said, now, let me see if I get this straight. If I calls you buckwheat, I gets me one of them Rolex watches. He said, yeah, because you're going to have to see what time it is for the next bus to leave to Chicago. And that was that story.
That's great.
That's in the book, too. Yeah.
That's great. Wow, man, that's a good. Man, I was like I was there, but because I know what you're saying. When someone's a little too tipsy, you don't want to, you don't want to be around it too much. Were you ever with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin at the same time?
Sure.
Was that...
Frank, I mean, I did the Dean Martin roast, and Frank, of course, I toured with 14 years in 45, 50 cities a year and stayed in his home 6 times a year. And Dean would come down there sometimes. And Dean and I played golf. I played golf with Dean and also did the roast. And I did a couple of corporate things with Dean. And I liked him a lot. I liked him a great deal.
Yeah.
He was really a terrific guy. And when they were together, those three, oh my God, it was like it was it's three icons,
So what I've heard in different interviews and they would say that Dean was one of the first to, when everyone's hanging out late at night, he would excuse himself and kind of get out of there. And he wouldn't probably. They said he wasn't as hard of a drinker as everyone. His image would,
but he drank a little, but Dean also was a loner kind of guy, and he'd done all that before. He'd done all that hanging out, and he would. I'll tell you what, he wouldn't excuse himself. Sometimes you look around and say, "Where'd Dean go?" He's gone.
Oh, really?
He's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone. One of the great stories is he was having a party at his house in Beverly Hills. One of the kids' confirmation or communion or something like that, and there was people there out in outside, and they were all drinking at the tables and everything. There was a little trio, and Dean disappeared. And the people all of a sudden, moments later. A squad car pulls up in front, and they come and they said, Mrs. Martin, the neighbors are complaining about the music. And Frank said, wait a minute. Frank went upstairs, and Dean was laying on the couch. He had like a 5-iron in his hand. He was watching TV, and Frank said, you called the cops, didn't you? He said, they call each other Deg. He said, Deg, I got to get up in the morning and go play golf. He said, yeah. He called the cops on his own party.
On his own party. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I'm reading a book now with Jerry Weintraub, his book, and did you ever get a chance to meet Mr. Weintraub
Yes,
at all?
he was one of the greatest promoters of all time. He was a member at Bel Air Country Club, and I'm a member at Lakeside, so I played a lot of golf at Bel Air, back and forth. And his son now is a member at Lakeside.
Oh.
Jerry Weintraub was an incredible promoter.
Wow.
He had an incredible mind, He put together some huge shows for Frank in his day.
He in this book that I'm listening, I'm listening to the audiobook. I love it because I can go on these long hikes and up at Runyon or Griffith Park or whatever, and just take you away. And he talks about the day that Frank Sinatra reached out to him. He said, "I want to meet with you," and he said, "Well, I got meetings today." And he goes, "No, I want you to. There's a plane waiting for you in Santa Monica, a flight at Palm Springs, and you'll be home for supper by 7 or whatever." And just the fact that would happen, because you know what I mean. Like, imagine you're going to this airport, flying up to Palm Springs. The car picks you up. You're meeting with Frank Sinatra. It's like, that's great, It's a totally different life than I'm living right now,
Well, and that's what touring with Frank was about. When I was living in this condo, I mean, it was time to go on the road. A limo would pull out in front. 2 big guys would come and carry my luggage down. They'd carry me down if I wanted to be carried down, drive me out even to the Van Nuys Airport, and pull right out to the private jet.
Wow.
And I'd get on the private jet. And the moment Frank got on the jet, that pre-flight, everything better be done. All of it, because the moment he stepped foot on that jet, he would say to the pilot, whose name was Johnny Spots, he'd say, "Let's go, Spots," and they'd take off down the runway. We'd take off. It cut all the fat out of travel. We would land, squad cars and limousines would rush us to the arena. We'd do the show. We'd get there like an hour before the show. If we get there like 5 o'clock, show 6 or whatever it was. If we got there at 7, the show started at 8. Anyhow, we'd do the show. Squad cars and limousines would rush us out of the arena. Frank would leave, like I say, the building was on fire. We'd be flying over the venue. People were just getting in their cars and away out. And that's the way you traveled with them all the time.
Wow.
Exciting.
In this book that I'm listening to, he talks about, I guess there was a point where Mr. Sinatra was going through a little depression a little bit, and he goes, "I need something," and Jerry Weintraub was like, I got it. He goes, "But I can't tell you what it is now. Let me just kind of figure a couple of things out, and he goes, "I want to know what it is now." And apparently in this book, he said a lot of the things that he would do is he would just start improvising and talking, and the next thing you know, he could talk his way out of, into something good. Yeah. And he said, "I'm picturing you performing in New York City, Madison Square Garden," and then Frank was like, "Well, I've done that already." He goes, No, this is going to be different. This is going to be, I'm picturing boxing ring, middle of Madison Square Garden, Howard Cosell, and Lady the Heavyweight Singer, and
the main event,
he starts painting this picture. You know the story, and then he said Frank got so excited, he goes, "Let's do it this Saturday," and he's like, "Well, let's let me put the pieces together." But he described what that was like, and that great special that he did, and I guess even in the book, like, Frank was, he didn't want to go to rehearsals. He's like, "No, I'll just send you." And I guess at one point he sent his set list, and the set list was, I don't remember exactly. It was like, a lot of disco songs, things that he would never sing. And Jerry Weintraub was like, "Are you crazy? This set list?" Like, so he goes over there and he meets Frank at his hotel, and he said Frank was smoking a cigarette, reading a newspaper, not even bothered. And then Frank said something like, "I knew that set list would bring you over here." And then Jerry Weintraub was like, "Okay, here's what we just need to we need to figure out, like, what songs, because apparently they need commercial breaks. We need to know, all that kind of stuff for television." And Frank was like, "No, I'll sing. They'll go to a commercial, and I'll be and then I'll just still keep singing. That's how life is. You sing. I'm in the middle of a song. It doesn't matter." And he goes, "But I do need to know the final song. Give me 5 minutes before. Is there a kid with a red coat? Get a boy with a red coat, and then he'll have a sign that says 5 minutes left." And that's when I'll launch into, I think New York.
New York, yeah.
Yeah, and he goes, "When that happened," he goes, "and at that point, make sure my wife is and the other people are in the plane. We have the pizzas ready," and because he wanted to go straight to that, and having forced, and the way Jerry says in this book, they had the pizzas. They're eating pepperoni, laughing, and the plane is descending up or ascending into the clouds, and they're on their way back to Palm Springs.
I did that. That for 14 years. That same type of exit.
Wow.
Same types of entrance and exit. He'd always leave them wanting a little bit more, and he'd get out of there. He was a magnificent performer. Arguably the greatest career show business has ever known, and for a lot of reasons. First of all, the greatest pop singer of all time. You can't argue that he wasn't the greatest pop singer of all time. He went to the studio 1,431 times. He recorded over 100 albums. He recorded 1,200 original songs. Wow. Songwriters haven't done that. You know, songwriters, singers. I mean,
yeah.
You know, he won the Academy Award. You know, From Here to Eternity. I asked him one night. I'm sitting one night in his compound with Gregory Peck, and all the women had gone to bed. His compound had bungalows all around the outer perimeter, and that's where the house guests stayed. So it would be Gregory Peck and his wife Veronique. It was Kirk Douglas and his wife Ann, Jack Lemmon, his wife Felicia, Clint Eastwood and whoever he was dating at the time. You know, Robert Wagner, Joe St. John, Angie Dickinson. These wonderful house guests. These were people I saw in the movies when I was a little boy. When I'd go over there, sometimes I was pinch myself. I said, "What am I doing here? Guess who doesn't belong in this picture?" But they treated me like an equal. They were always, none of them were like the Hollywood celebrities of today who do 2 appearances on a sitcom and think that you're supposed to bow down when they walk by. They were so comfortable in their own skin. But we were sitting there one night, and they were talking about acting and directing, and I noticed they were paying great reverence to Frank. So I was just curious, because, you know, in Hollywood you say, you know, I've studied acting here and I studied acting in Chicago, but a lot of times they want to tell you who they studied with. I studied with Stella Adler and people like. So I was curious, who did Frank study? And I said to Frank, did you study acting? And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm, said, acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough you didn't fool with. This guy danced with Gene Kelly. His acting, that's why he won the Academy Award, and also for The House I Live In. But when you gave Frank a song, to him it was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? Frank would immerse himself in that lyric and become that lonely guy in the bar whose woman left him, and he's never going to find love again. And you felt that. And the joy of a song. You know, come fly with me, let's fly away. I mean, he just was, he was a master at what he did.
And he enunciated. You hear every word in those songs.
But you felt that.
Yeah, you feel the words.
You felt, I mean, you know, Charlton Heston said, to watch Frank Sinatra sing a song is like watching a 4-minute movie. You know.
Wow.
That's why he interpreted lyrics better than anybody. Steve Lawrence is a brilliant singer, a wonderful singer, great singer. And I'm sitting with him one night, and he said to Frank, you know, we're having dinner, and he said to Frank, you know, you ruined it for all the rest of us. Because once they heard you sing it, they knew how it's supposed to be sung.
Yeah, that's great. During the pandemic, a lot of us weren't touring, we weren't doing shows. Did you, what was that like after having a long career and constantly on the go, doing this? Was there a time there where you were, like, how did you handle the pandemic?
Well, you know, first of all, I did some more writing, of course, you know, and I was writing a book, which was that right there. Wow. And I did some virtuals. You know what I did? I charged people that I was going to do a virtual. I do a one-man show, a 90-minute show now called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. It used to be called An Evening of Laughter and Memories of Sinatra. But I cut it short. It's The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. It's a 90-minute show. I come out on stage and I do stand-up comedy, then I segue over to a bar that has a bottle of Jack Daniels on it, which was Frank's drink of choice. And after about 30 minutes of stand-up comedy, I go to the bar and I tell a funny joke to the audience, and they laugh and all the lights go out and Frank comes on the screen singing. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. And it's like he's singing to me. I'm behind the bar.
Wow.
Set him up, Joe. I got a little story. I think you ought to know. Anyhow, he gets to the chorus, make it one for my baby and one more for the road, and he goes off screen, and the spotlight hits me, and now I'm in a bar, and I've come home, and the audience is in a bar with me. And I tell them, the first time I heard that voice, I was 10 years old, shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago in Harvey, Illinois. And then I take the audience from that little boy in Harvey, Illinois, hearing Sinatra on the jukebox, to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So I take him on the journey.
Yeah.
And while I'm telling stories, pictures are coming on the screen, authenticating the story. So and some video. So during the pandemic, during the lockdown, I got people that were fans of this show and wanted to see the show to, you know, add it out on social media, let them know what day was happening, but send me, either through email or Facebook, whatever, questions you would like me to answer. And then, and they were charged for that, but I had the stack of questions, and I made sure that every question that was asked, I had a funny story or a poignant story. And it had a beginning and a middle and an ending. So it was entertaining. I told stories like I'm talking to you now, but I also read their... This is from Clara, from Bismarck, North Dakota. She wants to know, and whatever, and then I would tell a story. How did you meet Frank? What was the greatest performance you ever felt you saw with Frank? What was it like staying in his home? And tell us about his compound. And all these... But I always had a beginning, a middle, and ending to every, to every question,
That's great. So, and
that's how I spent the pandemic, doing that, writing more material, doing cameos.
Oh yeah, me too. Do the cameos.
And then getting the book completed, and then promoting the book.
I remember I spoke to you during the pandemic, and it felt great just to hear your voice. I was like, okay, good. Life is going to be okay. And if I can find the clip, I'll play it on the podcast. I like something. There was a video that early on, and you made a little video, and it just was so poignant and it just inspirational about they can't stop this, they can't stop that, they can stop, but you can't stop laughing, you can't, something like you. It's a really great message. I have it somewhere in my files.
Yeah, it was during the lockdown. I was just trying to give people, hey, look,
Yeah.
They can stop us from going out, but they can't stop us from laughing. They can't stop us from singing. They can't stop us from calling. Whatever I said, I can't remember.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was. You could tell you were like feeling it, and it was just like, hey, fellow man, this is what we're gonna do. And I remember I downloaded it, I shared it. You guys gotta check out Tom Dreesen. Like he's one of our shining lights of hope. And but yeah, things are opening up again. We're getting out there. We're doing shows. It's feeling good. Writing. Having stuff happen in our lives. Writing it, performing it. Where I love that part of stand-up comedy. Where
me too.
There's that little thing where you're like, oh, that happened to me, and then you share it on stage, and the audience is like clapping, like that happens. Yes, us too.
Yeah.
That humanity, that bonding with your fellow person, and I love that.
Yeah.
I was watching a documentary. You're in it. Palm Springs, his compound, Frank Sinatra's compound in Palm Springs, and all about that. And it was another great documentary. And
what's that called? That's called Frank Sinatra. Is it Frank Sinatra in Palm Springs or something?
I don't know. I know that if you Google Palm Springs Frank Sinatra, it comes up, and it's
a great. I mean, it's a fun documentary. I just say it's great, but it's a fun documentary.
And you're in it. I didn't know you were in it. I was like, this is great. I know Tom. He's right there.
I'm in it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm one of the few. Most of those people in that documentary were. Other than Barbara Sinatra was there, but most of those people didn't know Frank. I mean, they met him. They owned a tavern, or they were doorman, or they were a valet. There's very few people alive today who really knew Frank Sinatra. Yeah. There's a lot of people met him once or twice and wrote 4 books about him. There's a lot of people who never met him and wrote books about him. But there's very few people alive who really knew him. Of course, his children and a couple of people that I can think of that really knew him personally, but who could elaborate on not only. I mean, we flew all around together. We performed together. I hung out together. He never went to bed till the sun came up. Whether we were on the road or off the road, he was nocturnal. So when the sun came up, Frank went to bed, and he wanted you to hang with him. So when I stayed at his home down in the desert in Rancho Mirage, he would come and get me out of my bungalow and say, "Come on, Tom, let's take a ride." We'd ride around till the sun came up, and talk about his childhood and talk about my childhood, and I really got to know him. I've given, and I don't enjoy it at all. I spoke at his funeral, and I was a pallbearer at his funeral, but I've given eulogies, as most of us have, and for comedians and stuff. But that a mother could get up and talk about this man in the coffin or this woman in the coffin, and she'd have that perspective, and that perception of that person, and the father might have a totally different perception. And then the children would have a different perception, but his buddies would have a totally different perception from all of them.
Right.
And so that's from whence I speak. I knew him as a pal, a buddy. When I first started touring with him, he was the boss of that tour. So he was the boss.
Right.
As years go by, we became friends, hanging out. And toward the end of his life, he was like a father to me. He gave me fatherly advice, and things that I'll never forget.
Did you ever were you friends with his other? I know he had the different openers over the years. Did you meet those comics?
Only one that I really. I met a couple of them. I mean, I knew Charlie Callis did it for a little while. So did Jackie Gale for a little while. Jan Murray for a little while. But Pat Henry Pat Henry did like a length. Like I was with him more years than any other artist, any other opening act, because when I was with him, he wasn't doing film. Like when he was with Pat Henry, he would go off on film locations. But when I was with him, we were doing shows.
Yeah.
So I knew, and Rickles,
Oh wow.
I know all those guys and talk to them, and what it was like being with Frank.
That's cool. Yeah.
For me, it's like I was an altar boy. It was like serving mass for the Pope.
Yeah. Yeah, and you the different comics would work with him at different stages, like you said, of his career, different ages and stuff, and
he wanted me, and I don't mean this as bragging, but he wanted me because he knew I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. Every time you did the Tonight Show, you had to come up with a new 5 or 6 minutes. He wanted a comedian who could keep changing their material because we worked the same cities often. We went to Chicago every year, we'd go to Detroit every year, we'd go to New York City every year, and he had an incredible following. So he wanted a comedian that would be a little more original. He wanted a younger comedian at that time. I was a much younger guy at that time, and he wanted somebody that could get the audience up, for him, and somebody who had fresh and original material. And he would listen to it backstage. If we were working Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, Atlantic City, or even in the big arenas, he would listen to it before he went on, listen to what I was doing,
Yeah. Did you guys ever go to a place where as a comic, sometimes you go to a certain market and the ticket sales just aren't where you want it to be? Did that ever happen?
Not with Frank Sinatra.
Not with Frank Sinatra, right? That's great. And they also were smart. They chose areas that.
By the way.
Yeah.
Smart or not, Frank Sinatra sold out in Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, 20,000 seaters.
Wow.
Big arenas.
Wow.
Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, Detroit, Michigan, of course, in New York, Boston, all the major cities. But he sold out in Japan.
Wow.
When he was 78 years old, 20,000 seaters. In Hawaii, 40,000 people. 40,000 outdoors. They had big screens up. I had to go up and do in front of 40,000 people stand-up comedy. At one time in his earlier career, you looked it up in the Guinness Book of Records, 175,000 people in Brazil.
Wow.
No single artist. There might be a rock group, the Stones or somebody that would have done that, or the Beatles, something. But he, one single singer, 175,000 people. Amazing career.
He could sing about coffee and make it good. I heard that coffee song the other day. It was so good.
Well, a couple of times in the 14 years I toured with him, only twice did he could not go on stage because he called his throat his reed.
Oh.
He said, my reed, I can't do it. And I told him one night, I said, we were in Atlantic City, and Frankie Jr., his son, subbed for him both nights. Frankie was also conducting at that time, conducting the orchestra for his dad, and so it was an easy replacement. And I'd go out and make an announcement. Mr. Sinatra can't do the show tonight. He's got a bad throat, but we're going to do a show, Frankie Jr. and I. And people would stay, for the most part. But I told him one night one of those nights, I said, Frank, with all due respect, you could go out and read the phone book and they wouldn't leave. They want to be with you. They want to be in the same room with you.
Yeah.
And if you said, folks, I can't sing, but I'll talk. I told him, I said, Frank, if you want, I'll be the, I'll MC and and I'll be the moderator and I'll bring up questions, but he didn't want to do it.
The reason I bring that up about the seats, in this Jerry Weintraub book, he was talking about Elvis Presley, and he was right when he first started promoting Elvis, and it was in Florida, and he said that at that time Jerry was probably 26 years old, I think he said, and not as experienced, but he really was had the gumption to go for it. And the theater owner said, yeah, we've sold 10,000 tickets. He's like, really? Wow, well, let's do a matinee. So they added a matinee, and then he gets there that week, Jerry does, and he sees a big pile of papers on the desk, and he goes, what's that? And the theater owner says, those are unsold tickets. And he goes, what are you talking about? You said that we... And he goes, well, I was just telling you what you'd want to hear. And he's like, I learned that you got to be more hands-on. That's a lesson you learned. You can't just go with what they want to, you want to hear. And so... Because Elvis told him, I don't want to play it. I don't want to see empty seats when I'm out there. That's the one thing. Elvis goes, I want two things. I want my real fans in the front row, in the front. I don't want just industry people with the free tickets. I want real people, real fans, and I also don't want to see empty chairs. Long story short, Jerry paid paid to have 5,000 seats unbolted and hid in the parking lot, covered with tarps. So then when Elvis was on stage, he'd see the 5,000 seats.
Yeah.
And then the nighttime show, they put the seats back in, and Elvis, according to this book, Elvis never knew, and he goes, "I like both shows, but that second one was a lot louder."
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's what promoters are supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, you know, and somebody like Weintraub, he was brilliant. You know,
Right.
in his field, he's a brilliant promoter, and that's what it's all about. It's all about marketing. It's about you can be the greatest talent in the world if you don't have the proper marketing, the proper public relations. In my day, I always tell everybody, and not that my day is, I'm still performing, but I tell young comedians today, when I started out, everywhere you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. Their next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you went on Johnny Carson in the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian. So that was where you had to go.
Yeah.
That was a stairway
Right.
to stardom for the stand-up comedian, if you could get on that Tonight Show. Today, it's the social media.
Right.
You know, but one appearance on the Tonight Show, 26 million people saw you on that show that night.
Wow.
The next day, I got a development deal from CBS. A guy from CBS was watching the show, a guy named Lee Curlin. I had a wife and 3 kids, and I'm drawing unemployment. I'm on my rear end. And this guy saw me. The next day, they signed me to a development deal. William Morris, they wouldn't allow me to walk by their office. They signed me the next day.
Wow.
My whole world changed. Well, today, that's the social media. How do I get the world to know about my talent? The number one rule in sales, before I ever was in show business, I sold life insurance. The number one rule in sales is create the need. As a stand-up comedian those days, well, how do I create the need? You advertise. Well, how do I advertise? You get on television, the Tonight Show. Well, how do I get on the Tonight Show? Learn to do material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh.
Right.
In those days, clean material.
Yeah.
Today, you can work as filthy as you want, and you'll get a sitcom the next day.
Yeah.
But in my day, you couldn't say "go to hell" on TV.
Wow.
You know, so you had it was called. We're in a thing called show business. Take care of the show and take care of the business.
Yeah.
You know, and the business was to get on that Tonight Show. You know, in those days.
I also, it's funny. I've been writing clean for like the last 10 years, working clean, even when I don't have to. Even if it's late night, I'm at the Comedy Store, I can do whatever. Nope, I won't do it, because I also figure, why do it? It's like, it's not me. I'm already like 99% clean anyways. Why drop? You know,
Yeah.
That's just me. And I know you could do anything now because, like you said, the internet. But I think it's one more way to kind of separate ourselves from,
Well, you know, there's a difference between being naughty and
Right.
being dirty.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's why I know the difference between ethnic humor and racist humor.
Right.
You know, I've got an album out in front of an all-black audience called "That White Boy Is Crazy." I'm the only white guy ever to do an album in front of an all-black audience. As you know, Tim Reed and I were America's first black and white comedy team.
Yeah.
We were a comedy team for 6 years. History shows we were the last.
Yeah.
But so that you want to separate yourself from other comedians, but the most important thing is be yourself.
Yes.
Be true to yourself. Be yourself. Every comedian starts out emulating another comedian. So you're going on stage and you're doing them. When you're brand new, when you're doing open mics, you're doing an impression of another comedian, because
Yeah.
you know that worked. You
Right.
saw George Carlin or whoever
Yeah.
it was you like do that. So you're kind of emulating the other comedian. And one night you let a little bit of you out, and if it doesn't get a laugh, you go back into being this impression of another comedian. You know? And then one night you let a little bit of you out and it gets a laugh. You let a little bit more of you out, and pretty soon you start to evolve. And pretty soon, Candid Camera had the greatest line.
Yeah.
Caught in the act of being yourself.
Wow.
That was their tagline. Come on, welcome to our show. Caught in the act of being yourself. So that all of a sudden you become Darren Carter on stage. That's who you
Yes,
are.
yep.
Father, husband,
Yep, yep.
you know, whatever. And the same with me. You become and that's when you really start to grow.
Yeah.
You know? And be true to yourself. I was going on to the Laugh Factory one night. Now this has been over a year ago. I may have told you this story, but 2 young comedians were around the corner. I was trying to have some new material. I was looking at my notes, and they were around the corner. They didn't know I was there, and I didn't know they were there. But I heard them talking. One of them said, "You know, Tom Dreesen's here," and the other one said, "Oh yeah, he's old school." And the other comedian said, "He's old school? What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he doesn't use the F word." The other comedian said, "He doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives?" I stuck my head around the corner. I said, "Adjectives." That's what I use for adjectives.
Right.
But that's a problem with the F word. It's a noun, it's a pronoun, it's an adjective, it's an adverb. You know.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, I would have said the word. I don't know if you can swear on your show, but you know.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. But that's my point. I mean, I'm not right and I'm not wrong. You
Right.
know, there is no right or wrong. In comedy, there's one rule: be funny.
Be funny.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And if you think you're going to be funny for all people, you are so ready for disaster.
Right.
You cannot ever, you know, Wayne Dyer wrote a book years ago called Pulling Your Own Strings, and it was saying that 50% of all the people you meet in your life aren't going to like you.
True.
Not for anything you said or did. They're not going to actively campaign against you, but 50% of the people you meet do not like you. Well, we expose ourselves to thousands and millions in your lifetime. You know, accept the fact that not every... I promise you, if you got a standing ovation, if there were 300 people in the audience and you got a standing ovation, I promise you, 250 of those stood because they thought you really deserved that standing ovation.
Yeah.
30 stood because everybody else was standing, and 20 stood because they wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. And some people, I notice when I go to, there's certain concerts that, you know, I've gone with my wife, and I'm like, you know, and I think some people are real fans, and some people are sort of dragged there because of their spouse. And I also applied that with comedy. Sometimes I notice, like, you know, there might be some people that are really into the show, and other people are like, well, I'm with the group, they want to come here, I'm not really, they're preoccupied mentally, but, and you just...
And the other thing, too, not all people are laughers. You know, a lot of people, you know, we need guffaws. You know, and I used to tell that the comedy writers, sometimes some guys would submit me some stuff, and I said, these are all tee-hees. They're tee-hees. You know, they're the kind you'd write for a sitcom. Because a sitcom, when you're writing for a sitcom, you know, you say, don't forget to close that door. Ha, ha, ha. You hear that. But we have stand-up comedians. We need guffaws. We don't need tees. We need guffaws, you know. So, you know, when you're
I'm sorry, but I saw it today. This was so funny. I laughed, and I showed my wife, and she laughed too. About dog is my man's best friend, and my wife. No, my wife is my best. That one.
Well, it's when I say, you know, I don't think I'll ever get married again. I think I'll just get a dog. You know, a dog is man's best friend. And my buddy said, my wife is my best friend. I said, a dog is man's best friend. Put your wife and your dog in the trunk of your car, leave them there for an hour, open the trunk, see which one is happy to see you.
And it's just this visual of, like, you're like, oh my gosh, you know.
She won't be wagging her tail.
Exactly. The dog's like, yeah, she'll be barking, but not, you know, in a good way. But
you see something even there that when I hit that punchline with you, you know, see which one. You know, it's a way you go into a mic on that, and there's other times you pull off mic. And unfortunately, one of the greatest. I shouldn't say unfortunately, but if you mention it, you'll get all kinds of hate mail. But Bill Cosby was one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. Bill Cosby was absolutely a superb stand-up comedian. Every comedian in America should study him. He'd walk out on that stage, and he would no big hullabaloo. Sometimes he'd sit in a chair like this, and he'd start talking to the audience, and people had never seen him before say, this guy isn't that funny. He'd slowly talk. He got you to liking him. Essentially, this is not material, but this is what he would... Essentially, he's saying, folks, I know you've never met me before, but I'm a good guy and you can have a lot of fun. I'd like, if you don't mind, would you come with me in a car? I want to take you for a ride. And you know, I don't know, we just met him, Martha, and you get in the car and he's talking to you and driving you. You say, you know, I'm starting to like this guy. He's a good driver. I feel comfortable with this guy. Now he pulls in front of a place called an amusement park. He said, I'm going to take you inside. Yeah, let's go with him. Now we like him. Now after 10 minutes, you like him. He said, I'm going to take you on a ride. It's called a roller coaster. Well, let's go, Martha. Yeah, we like this guy. He takes you on a roller coaster, and you can't get off. Boom, boom, boom. He's got you now.
Yeah.
He doesn't come out and try to knock you over the head.
Right.
He takes you, come into my little world, and then he gets on a roll. He was one of the great stand-up comedians that you'd ever want to watch perform in front of a huge audience, or in front of 10 people, you know.
Wow.
And I talk about mic technique. He knew when to pull into that mic, when to pull off that mic. He had great stage presence. He knew when to do characters. You know, he was a joy to watch. You know.
That's fantastic. Tom, before we wrap up, is there any? What would you like to? Where can people follow you? What can they see you on? Where do you want them to go?
Go get me, if you will, go to Starbucks. You know, my website is tomdreesen.com, D-R-E-E-S-E-N, because everybody spells my name wrong, D-R-E-E-S-E-N, tomdreesen.com. My book's still standing, is on Amazon, and you can get it at a Barnes & Noble store, but if you went on Amazon, they have it to you in 2 days, you know. And this is bragging, but I'm really proud of this book. Right now, it's got 350 5-star reviews. The reviews are incredible, and people are contacting me every day. It's there's a lot of full circle stories in there, as I told you, and there's a lot of knockdown. It's called Still Standing because I've been a stand-up comedian for 50 years, 52 years now, but I've also been knocked down a lot in my life, physically knocked down, and I keep getting back up again.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope they'll get from this book, you know.
That's great, and I bet you're working on your next book, knowing you.
You know, I don't know if I want to write another book, but if I did, it would be motivational. It would be because I love motivating people.
Yeah.
And nothing turns me on more than showing somebody the way. You know, successful people want you too to become successful. You know, run away from people who belittle your ambitions. There are people out there who try to belittle your ambition. Run away from those people. Successful people want you too to become successful. You know, and so I think if I do another book, it'd be about motivation. You know, but I'm going to do stand-up comedy. I'll tell you a quick story before we wrap here. George Burns was, I was a fan of George. I roasted him on the Dean Martin roast, and I knew his manager, and I first was a fan of Jack Benny, and they were close friends. But George Burns, I went to see him when he was 95 years old. I was at Harrah's in Lake Tahoe, and he was at Caesar's Palace in Lake Tahoe, at Caesar's in Lake Tahoe. So I ran over to see his show. He was 95 years old. He didn't run out to the microphone, but when he got out there, he did an hour and 10 minutes, killed the audience. I went backstage afterward. He was looking in his dressing room, looking at some 3x5 cards. And I walked in and I said, "Hey, George." He said, "Oh, hi, Tommy." He said, "I was working on some new material tonight." And I said, "That's what I want to do. I want to be 95 years old working on new material."
Yeah.
That's my goal, you know.
That's great. You know, it's funny. I'll tell you who inspired me a little bit during the lockdown was our buddy Fraser Smith. So we're talking. There was nothing was really open. Not even. I mean, it was just nothing that was happening. It was all online. And at one time, maybe 5 months in, I mean, I had nothing coming up. There was nothing to come up really. Unless, you know, and I remember Fraser reached out and he goes, "Darren, let's do a writing session." I goes, "I'm working on some bits," and it was all like topical things that were happening, and I'm thinking, okay, and I started writing with them, you know, every 3 weeks, and it was every 2 weeks, and it was every week, and then finally things opened up, shows started, and when those shows opened up, he just hit the ground running. He was just crushing because he was doing stuff that was all like that was happening but it was very inspiring to be like writing stuff with no shows coming up. You know what I mean?
A guy asked me a question one time in an interview that no one had ever asked me, and I said, "That's a great question." I've done thousands of interviews in my career. He said, "Are you a comedian who writes, or are you a writer who's a comedian?" I said, "Boy, that's a great question." And I said, "I'm a comedian who writes." I said, because I love stand-up comedy. Writing is a chore. I can write, but it's a chore. Yeah. So I love the stand-up comedy. But I say to young comedians, if you're not good at writing material, you're not going to last very long. You can do two guys going to bar jokes the rest of your career.
Yeah.
But if you want to be original, if you're not a writer, take writing courses. Learn how to write a joke structure.
Yeah.
You know, when you're writing a joke, it's one of two things. Comedy is one of two things. Number one, it's 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that or do that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline.
Right.
And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in the joke? Me, you, society, the guy dating my daughter, you know, the laundryman, the doorman at the hotel. Somebody's going to be the victim in this joke, you know. So, but I'm saying, you know, you've got to learn how to write material and force yourself to write an hour a day or a half an hour a day or 10 minutes a day. I don't care, but every day write something.
Yeah. In closing, would you like to tell us a story about the guy that one time told you, I didn't ask to be born? Oh,
you know, this all started in my motivation talks, and now I do it in my nightclub act sometimes. But, you know, I talking to a bunch of young people, and I was saying that was when a guy stayed with his parents till he was 32 years old. It was in all the news. His parents had to sue him. It took him 8 years to get him out of the house. They had to sue him to get him out of the house. But yeah, I said, how long do you think you should live with your parents? And the kid said they were 50 or 60. I said, really? Why do you say that? He said, we didn't ask to be here. And a lot of young people today have that attitude. We didn't ask to be here. And I say, you didn't ask to be here. I don't want to give you a biology lesson, but when the male and the female make love, from the male comes 5 million seeds. Did you know that? 5 million seeds. 2.5 million die instantly. The other seeds die along the way, and pretty soon there's only 100,000 seeds left, and there's 50,000, and there's 100 seeds left. There's 10 seeds. There's 5 seeds left. 4, 3, 2, 1, you. I say you. Don't ever tell me you didn't ask to be here. Bullshit. You fought to be here. You're born a winner. You were born 5 million to 1 and you did it. You're a winner. You were born a winner. I want young people all the time to know this. You're not victims. Don't let anybody ever tell that you're victims. I don't care what happened in your past. I don't care what happened in my past. I had 8 brothers and sisters, both parents alcoholic. I lived in a shack. We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. We had no, and it wasn't during the Depression. I'm not that old. No bathtub, no shower, no hot water. We were raggedy poor, holes in my shoes as big around as a coffee cup. But I'm a victor. You know, and you're not victims. Don't let them sell you that song that you're a victim, because then they can control you.
Amen.
If you're a victim, then you have to rely on us to take care of you. Bullshit. You take care of you. Personal responsibility. You were born a winner.
Yeah. Tom Dreesen, everybody. Man, that was beautiful. Thank you for being on the Pocket Party, and he practices what he preaches. You know, honestly, it's like you've done, you know, the Tonight Show 61 times. You guest hosted with Letterman. You've done bigger things than most comedians will ever do, and you still take time to do comics podcasts, and you know what I mean. You're not like, oh, it's beneath me. You're out here. You're working with the people, and you're telling your stories, and you're sharing your stories. Tom, thank you so much.
But it's all downhill from here, you know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That's right. All right, Tom, you're the best. Thank you. Thanks for the laughs, and thanks for the inspiration.
It was fun to do.
It was great. Okay, that's it. You got it. Thank you.
Everybody listen to Darren Carter. We all know he's the party starter. So if you want to listen to a podcast for free, then listen to The Pocket Party.